In our previous video, I had started reassembling this watch and discovered that it had a broken jewel. The jewel that the escape wheel goes into on the main plate was broken, and so the escape wheel is wobbling back and forth when it turns, so the main plate had to be replaced. Well, I've got our old broken main plate here in a little Ziploc bag in my parts collection in case any of the other jewels or anything out of it is ever needed in the future. What I've ended up doing was I purchased another movement. And this one has the dial and hands from another Benrus watch, and the dial and hands are in kind of bad condition, especially the dial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this dial and hands off this movement, and this is an identical movement to the one that my watch has. It's the exact same Benrus DN2A, which is the ETA 1281 movement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hands and the dial off this, and then I'm going to completely disassemble this movement and give it a full service, the same thing I was doing with the movement that originally came with the watch. And then we'll go ahead and reassemble it and put it back together in my watch using the dial and hands in the case that came with the watch I originally started servicing. Now I'm not going to show the disassembly process on this. We've already seen this in the first video in this series where I disassembled the other movement, and this movement's identical, so there's no need to make a second video of that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to disassemble this, I'm going to clean it, and then we'll start reassembling it. I'll show the reassembly process from the beginning, even though I started reassembling the other movement in the previous video. That way we have a whole video with the entire reassembly process shown in a single video. So that's what we're going to see next. I'm ready to begin the reassembly of the new movement that I got for the Benrus watch. The first thing that I've done here is I've taken the base plate and put it in the movement holder, and then I put a little tiny drop of oil on the inside of this hole in the middle of the spot where the barrel goes. And the oil I use is the HP 1300, our thicker oil for slow moving parts. And I put a little drop of it just around the inside of that hole there to lubricate the barrel, because the bottom of the barrel arbor goes through there. Now the next thing we're going to do is actually drop the barrel in. And here's our barrel. This is the barrel that came from the old movement. Because I had already installed a new mainspring in it, I'm going to go ahead and use this one instead of the barrel that came with this new movement. And the barrel goes in with the lid side down. This is the side with the lid. And then this side here goes up. And you know that this is the up side because it has the screw threads in it for the ratchet wheel screw to go into there. And we're just going to drop it right into this spot. Make sure it's in the hole and everything. Okay, that's good. Now the next thing we need to do is add the barrel bridge. Actually, before we add the barrel bridge, there's something else we need to do. We need to put in the stem retaining screw because it drops into the main plate of the movement, and then the barrel bridge goes over the top of it and holds it in place. Now that goes into this hole right here, and it drops into the hole. It doesn't screw into it, it just drops in. There are screw threads at the very bottom of that screw to screw into the detent lever on the other side of the movement when we install that. But the rest of the shaft of it is smooth so that it can just drop into that hole. Now the next thing we need to do is take the barrel bridge. And the barrel bridge has a hole for the top of the barrel arbor to go through. We need to put a little bit of the HP 1300 oil on that as well on the inside of that hole, just like we did on the base plate. And then we can drop this into place. Let's go ahead and drop the barrel bridge into place. Now the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure it lines up with the hole for the barrel arbor, and then secondly that the stem retaining screw comes up through its hole in the barrel bridge. Alright, I've got it in place. Now there's 3 screws that hold this on. There's one that goes here, one that goes here, and the one that goes over here. Didn't have that snap down all the way. There we go. So we're going to go and put the screws in next. The barrel bridge screws are installed. Next we need to put in the drivetrain wheels, and we need to do that because the center wheel, where it goes, is partially covered up by the ratchet wheel that will go on later. So we need to put the drivetrain wheels in before we can put on the ratchet wheel and crown wheel. They go on top of the barrel bridge. Now the drivetrain wheels have to go in a specific order. The escape wheel goes into this hole right here, and then the fourth wheel goes into this one, and then the third wheel goes into this one, and then the center wheel goes into the plain hole here that doesn't have a jewel. And we have to put them in that order: escape wheel, fourth wheel, third wheel, then center wheel, so that they mesh with each other properly. Here's the escape wheel. Now before we can put the escape wheel in, we need to lubricate it. The escape wheel is unique because it's the only one of the wheels in the watch in which you put a lubricant on the gear teeth. You never put lubricant on any of the gear teeth of anything else in this watch, but the escape wheel has to have lubricant on the very tips of its teeth. And the reason for that is because the pallet fork jewels have to slide across the faces of those gear teeth, and so they have to have a little bit of lubricant to facilitate that. And the amount of lubricant needed is very small. It's almost impossible to put the right amount on every tooth. And so what we do is we put a little drop of it on every fourth tooth on the escape wheel, and then once the watch starts running, the pallet jewels will pick up some of that lubricant from the gear teeth that were lubricated, and it will spread them to the other ones. And after running through a few cycles of the escape wheel turning its full rotation, the lubricant will be evenly distributed across all the gear teeth. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and I can't do that on camera. It's too intricate. I need to look at this through an eye loop to do it right, because you only want to get it on the very, very tips of the teeth, the part facing outward. You don't want it on the top or the bottom of the teeth. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And the lubricant that we're using for this is the Mobius 9415 escape wheel lubricant, and it's kind of a thick gel-like substance. But when it's put on the teeth and the watch starts running, it takes on more of a liquid consistency once it actually starts having movement on it. But it looks like kind of a thick gel when you're putting it on. I've got the escape wheel and the drive wheels all installed, and if you'll notice, they all stack on top of each other. Escape wheel on the bottom, then the fourth wheel, and then the third wheel on top of that, and then the center wheel on top of that. All of them except for the center wheel go in with their pinion side sticking up. Each wheel has attached to its spindle that goes through it a pinion, which is a smaller gear. The pinion is on one side of it, so the side with the pinion goes up and the side without a pinion goes down. The exception is the center wheel. Its pinion goes down. Now the next thing we need to do is put on the drivetrain bridge, and the drivetrain bridge drops down on top of all these wheels, and it's kind of tricky to get in because you need to make sure that all of the pivots stick into their jewel holes before you screw it down and before you push it down into place, because otherwise you can break the pivots, which are the little tips on the ends of the spindles for each wheel. And what I usually try to do is get the one for the center wheel lined up and then drop it down once I've turned it so that the others are reasonably well lined up, and then I can check it under a loop and make sure that all the pivots are in place before I push it down. That might be I'm not sure. That may be pretty close. I need to look at it under a loop and see. I've taken all the train wheels off the movement again because when I put the train bridge on, everything worked smoothly until I tightened the screws, and then everything froze up. And I think the problem was with the escape wheel that's on it. I've got another escape wheel I'm going to use that I'm going to try. But first I'm going to put the lower escape cap jewel onto the bottom of the movement, and it goes onto the base plate right here. And I need to put some lubricant on the jewel before we can do that. And the jewel has two sides. One side of the jewel is flat, and the other side of the jewel has a domed curve shape to it. We want to put the lubricant on the flat side, and we're going to put a little drop of Mobius 9010, the light oil, and we're going to put enough just to cover about 50% of the jewel's face, and then I'm going to turn the jewel upside down and set it here onto the movement and screw it down into place with its retaining screw. I've got the lower escape cap jewel installed and screwed in place. Now we're going to flip the movement back over, put it back in the movement holder, and put the train gears back in and see if we can make it work this time. Now I finally have the train bridge on and working. Let's test it out here. You can see that touching the center wheel sends all the gears into motion. The escape wheel is turning nice and freely. It's not wobbling this time like it did before with the old base plate. So we're all set. We're ready to put on then the rest of the stuff that goes on top of the barrel bridge. We've got to put on the ratchet wheel here, the click spring and click here, and then the crown wheel washer and the crown wheel right here. Here's our ratchet wheel, and you can see the center of it has a square hole instead of a round hole. The reason is that the top of the barrel arbor is also square, and so we need to match this up when we put it onto the top of the barrel arbor so that the square barrel arbor goes into the square hole in the ratchet wheel. I've got the ratchet wheel installed, and you can see that it's lined up with the squares matching with each other. Now I need to put the screw in, then the next thing I'm going to do is add the crown wheel washer to the crown wheel post and then put the crown wheel over that. I have the ratchet wheel screw in. When I tightened it down, I had to kind of put my finger over the ratchet wheel to keep it from turning when I turn the screw. Otherwise, you can't get it tightened down tight enough. Now I've got the crown wheel washer in place on the crown wheel post right there. Now I'm going to put the crown wheel on. There we go. Need to drop it in and make sure that the gear teeth mesh with the gear teeth on the ratchet wheel. Now I'm going to add the screw for that next, and the screw for the ratchet wheel, if you remember from the previous videos, is a left-handed screw, which means to tighten it, I've got to turn it the opposite direction you normally would. Normally you turn a screw clockwise to tighten and counterclockwise to loosen. This screw is opposite. We're going to turn it counterclockwise to tighten it. And that's an important thing to remember with this. Almost all watches have a left-handed screw on their crown wheel. Here's our click spring. We're going to put this in next. Now the click spring drops into the spot here underneath where the click goes. But it's important to orient it correctly because if you look at the click spring, The spring has a little sort of a knob on each end. One of them is larger than the other one. The larger one goes on this side, and the other goes on the other side of the... Alright, there's how it goes in. I had a difficult time getting that in because it wouldn't slide under the ratchet wheel. I ended up having to loosen the ratchet wheel and lift it up a little to get it under there. And then I tightened the ratchet wheel back up. So that's how the click spring goes in. Now we're going to put the click in next. I had to take it off camera so I could verify looking through a loop that I had the click oriented correctly, and it is. So we can test the operation of it by turning the ratchet wheel slightly with the screwdriver. And you can see the clicks working. And when we start the spring up, it sends the wheels into motion. Next, I need to lubricate the drivetrain jewels. I'm going to put a little drop of the HP 1300 oil on the center wheel, and I'm also going to use HP 1300 on the third wheel. And then I'm going to use Mobius 9010 on the fourth wheel and the escape wheel jewels, and then I will turn it over and put the same oils on the lower jewels for those same ones. Now the escape wheel's lower jewel is already lubricated because we did that when we lubricated the cap jewel, but the third wheel and fourth wheel have jewels down there that need to be lubricated. The center wheel does not, because the center wheel goes through a plain bearing that doesn't have a jewel, so we're not going to lubricate the bottom of it. Now that I've lubricated the jewels, the drivetrain is working a lot more smoothly. You can see here when I spin up the drivetrain that the escape wheel, when it stops, it has a little bit of a backlash, just like it ought to. Notice how it kind of goes backwards slightly when it ends. So it's working perfectly. So we've got a good drivetrain now. Now we can start assembling the escapement. The next thing we need to add is the pallet fork and the pallet bridge. I've got the pallet fork in place now. If you notice, the long stem on the back of the pallet fork goes between the two banking pins. That has to be placed there like that. Once we've got it in where the long stem is through the banking pins and the pallet fork's pivot is in the jewel that it goes into, then we can put on the pallet bridge. Now, one note about the pallet fork, if you want to know which side to put up and which side goes down, the spindle through the middle of the pallet fork is shorter on the top and longer on the bottom. So the longer end of the pallet fork's staff is what goes downward. Now our pallet bridge has two holes in it that correspond with these pins right here on the movement base plate. These are for alignment. So if you put it on with these going through the holes in the pallet bridge, it should be lined up with the pallet fork, and the jewel should just sit right into it pretty easily. And then there's a hole in the middle for a screw. Pallet fork and pallet bridge are now installed. The next thing we need to do in order to finish assembling the escapement is we need to put in the balance jewels. There's a lower set of balance jewels in the bottom of the base plate, and the upper set are in the balance cock. So we'll start with the ones on the base plate. And the jewels are a two-part jewel. They work like an ankle block system. They've got a lower jewel that is set into a metal ring called the chaton, and that drops into the housing on the base plate. And then there's a cap jewel that sits on top of the jewel that's in the chaton. And both the lower ones and the upper ones for the balance wheel work the same way. They both have the same kind of a system. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to lubricate those jewels and then assemble them into the movement base plate. I'm going to start with the lower balance jewel. And both of the balance jewels, the upper one and the lower one, are each a two-part system. One part of the jewel is a pass-through jewel that the pivot from the balance staff goes through, and it has a metal housing that sits in called the chaton. And this goes into the movement first, and then on top of that will go the cap jewel, which is just a plain jewel. The cap jewel has a flat side and a rounded side. The flat side is what we're going to put our lubricant on. And the way that this works is I'm going to put a drop of lubricant on the cap jewel, and it's going to be the Mobius 9010, the light oil. And then I'm going to pick it up with a jewel picker and drop it onto the top of the jewel that's in the chaton, and that'll make the two of them stick together because the oil on the cap jewel will stick to the lower jewel, and then drop them into the space on the movement where they go, which is right here. And right now the spring that holds it in place is closed. We need to open the spring before we do anything else. And I'm going to see if I can do that on camera without messing something up. Now this spring looks similar to an ankle block spring, but it's actually not an ankle block system. It's actually a different name. It's called an EMO. This is one of a lot of different types of shock jewel systems that were invented by other companies who wanted to avoid using the ankle block and paying their patent for that. This one works very similar to ankle block. It has a hinge on one side and two little tines on the ends of the spring on the other side that fit into little grooves in the movement there. And so to open those, what you do is you take your tweezers and you push against these sides right here, like that, to open it. And I'm being really careful here because I do not want to break this. These springs are impossible to obtain more of if I were to break it. And then you do both sides like that to open it, and then you hinge it open. I'm having trouble seeing this on the computer, on the camera screen, so I'm going to do this looking at it through an eye loop. I've got the spring open now and hinged up, so now it's ready to receive the chaton. But first I need to put the oil on the jewel and get those stuck together. Alright, I've got it in. Now it's time to close up the spring. I've pushed it shut there. Now I need to get it latched in. And to do that, I need to push each of these, the two tines, back into their spot in the housing. And I'm not sure if I can do this on camera. I'm going to try and see, but if not, I may have to take it off camera to do it. I'm going to do the same procedure on the upper balance jewel, and then we'll be ready to put in the balance wheel and balance cock on the other side of the movement. Alright, I've gone ahead and installed the upper jewels for the balance wheel and the balance cock, so we're ready to go ahead and install the balance cock into the movement. And I've also wound up the mainspring in the movement all the way so that it'll have plenty of amplitude to get started. And when we put the balance cock in, or the balance wheel in, it should start up then, if we've got everything set up right. So let's see what happens. There it goes. I had a little bit of trouble getting it perfectly aligned. I couldn't get the bottom spindle to drop into the bottom pivot to drop into the jewel easily, but once I finally got it in there, it came right to life. So I need to put in the screw that holds the balance cock in place, and with that, the escapement is completely assembled. The next thing that we need to do is turn the movement over and install the keyless works and the motion works on the dial side of the movement. Now, I'm not going to regulate the watch yet. You need to let it run like this for a minimum of 24 hours before you do any regulation. That way all the lubrication can work itself in. I think I'm going to go ahead and stick it on the Timegrapher though, just out of curiosity, and kind of see where we're at now. And then in another 24 hours or so, I'll put it back on and do the final regulation. But I'm just curious to see how it's running, see if we've improved the amplitude or anything since we did the service on it. So I think I'm going to do that next before we turn it over and start working on the keyless works. Here's our initial Timegrapher readings with no regulation done. -9 seconds per day, 267 degrees of amplitude, and 0.2 milliseconds of beat error. The rate's easily corrected out when we do the final regulation. The amplitude is excellent for a 65-year-old watch, and the beat error is nearly perfect. So I'm happy with how this one turned out. This is going to be an easy one to regulate and get to work well. While we're waiting for the 24-hour break-in period before we do the final regulation, we can go ahead and do assemble the motion works and the keyless works and put the hands and dial on. We're ready to begin assembling the motion works and the keyless works, and the first thing I'm going to do here is put the cannon pinion back on. And I should have done this earlier after I put the center wheel in and after I put the train bridge on, and I forgot about it, but it's okay, we can go ahead and do it now. Here's our cannon pinion, and as you can see, it's a gear with a tube sticking out the top of it, and this goes over the lower spindle for the center wheel. And we just drop that onto there just like that. Now this snaps down into place, and we're going to have to push it down until it snaps and locks in. And for that, we're just going to use our tweezers. And what I'm going to do is put them here on the tube and push them down onto the gear at the bottom of the tube. And just gently, slowly, you don't want to force it down or jam it down, but just gently, slowly push it down until it snaps in place. And there, I just heard the snap, so I knew it went in. Now I need to put it back in the movement holder. The reason I took it out of the movement holder to do that is because you want the top post for the center wheel to have something solid under it, so that when you're pushing on the lower post of the center wheel, it doesn't smash through the jewel and break it, which can sometimes happen if you push too hard. So by having it on a solid surface, that helps mitigate the possibility of that. The next thing we're going to add is the minute wheel. And the minute wheel goes onto this post right next to the cannon pinion. We want to make sure the gears for the minute wheel mesh with the gear at the bottom of the cannon pinion. Now we need to put in next the two intermediate wheels. The two intermediate wheels go on these two posts right here. one of the wheels is smaller than the other, and the smaller one goes on this post, and the larger one goes on the post next to the minute wheel. Now, when you put these on, the small intermediate wheel, if you look at the teeth of it, the teeth on one side of the wheel are rounded at the tops of the teeth, and the teeth on the other side are just flat. You want the rounded side. You want the side with the rounded teeth to go down when you put this in here for the small one. The larger wheel doesn't matter; both sides are the same. Now, the next thing we're going to put in is the clutch and the winding pinion. Here's the clutch. Now, it has two sides. One side has this sort of pattern of flat surfaces engraved in it that are kind of triangular, and the other side has sharp teeth carved into it. The side with the sharp teeth is what will engage with the intermediate wheels when you have the watch in time setting mode, and the side with the flat surfaces cut into it that are carved into it at an angle, those are going to push against the winding pinion to turn it when you have it in winding mode. And so when we put this into the watch, we want to put the surface that goes against the winding pinion toward the outside of the movement, and the surface that goes against the intermediate wheels goes toward the inside of the movement. Just like that. Now, the next thing we're going to put in is the winding pinion. And the winding pinion also has two sides. One side has the same kind of a pattern cut into it that the clutch has, and this side faces toward the clutch. The other side is just smooth. Now, what we want to do here before we put this in, we want to put a little bit of grease on the clutch side. Just a real thin layer of Mobius 9504 grease is what I'm going to use for this. And then after we get that put on, we can drop it in. So let me go ahead and put the grease on it. I've greased the clutch side of the winding pinion, so now it's ready to go into the movement. And I'm going to drop it in. I'm going to drop it into this spot right here in between the clutch and the edge of the movement, with the clutch side facing toward the clutch itself. I've got the winding pinion in, and now I'm going to go ahead and put the stem in temporarily so that it keeps all these things in the proper alignment while we put on the rest of the keyless works. The stem has to go through the center of the winding pinion and the center of the clutch. See how it now turns the clutch, and the clutch is turning the intermediate wheels. Okay, now that's as far as it goes in. So we'll go ahead and leave that there like that for now. The next thing we need to put in is going to be the yoke and then the yoke spring. The yoke goes in just like this. The hole on the end of it goes over this post here, and then it stretches across here. And the fine tip of it here needs to go into the groove on the side of the clutch so that when the yoke moves back and forth, it will move the clutch back and forth. The next thing we need to put in is the yoke spring. And the yoke spring looks like this. And it goes into this cutout area right here. One side of the spring goes against this side here, and then it curves around in here, and then goes against the back of the yoke. And it's kind of a pain to get in. I'm not going to be able to do that on camera without the risk of it flying away, because if you're not careful when you put this in, it'll spring away from you. So I'm going to have to hold it in place with one hand while I work it in with a screwdriver into that spot. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. The yoke spring is in. You can see how it goes along there into this curve and then back against the back of the yoke. And notice how the side that has the kink in it is the side that goes toward the outside of the movement, the side toward the yoke. Now, the next thing we're going to add is the detent lever, and the detent lever screws onto the stem retaining screw that we put in on the other side of the movement, which is that screw right there. And so we're going to set the detent lever onto that, and then I've got to take the movement out of the holder and screw the screw in from the other side while holding the detent lever in place with my finger, which is not going to be an easy thing to do, so I'm going to do that off camera too. The detent lever is screwed in place, and I want to call your attention to a couple of important things. There's one post that sticks up right here, and there's another post on the bottom of it. And the post on the bottom of it has to go into the groove on the stem, so that when you pull the stem in and out, that groove hooks onto that post and turns the detent lever. Because that movement of the detent lever is what moves the yoke back and forth to move the clutch back and forth. And we'll see that once we get this completely assembled. I'll demonstrate how the keyless works actually functions. Now, our next thing we need to add is going to be the set bridge. And the set bridge is a metal plate that covers up most of this stuff and keeps it from falling out. It holds the minute wheel in place. It holds the intermediate wheels in place. It holds the yoke and the yoke spring in place too. The set bridge is in place. Now, the set bridge does two things. It covers up all these parts of the keyless works and keeps them from falling out. But it also has this long extension here that goes over to the knob on the top of the detent lever, and that's called the detent spring. And the way that the keyless works functions is when you pull the stem out, you can see how it pushes the clutch back against the intermediate wheel. So when you turn the stem, it then turns the wheels for setting the time. And when you push it back in, the clutch goes against the winding pinion, which the winding pinion reaches up through to the other side of the movement to the crown wheel, which then turns the ratchet wheel, which turns the mainspring to wind it. So when you wind the crown, you're winding the mainspring. So that's how the keyless works functions. Now there's one other part that goes on to the motion works. The motion works is a set of gears here that makes the hands move. The cannon pinion is what carries the minute hand. And then the cannon pinion turns when the center wheel turns because it's on the bottom of the center wheel. And when the cannon pinion turns, it turns the minute wheel. And the minute wheel then interacts with the hour wheel. And the hour wheel sits on top of the cannon pinion. And the hour wheel is what carries the hour hand. And the minute wheel, by interacting with the hour wheel and the cannon pinion, provides the synchronization between the hour hand and the minute hand so that they move at the right distances relatively to each other. Every time the minute hand makes a full revolution, then the hour hand then moves from one number to the next on the hour scale. I've taken the hour wheel back off because it'll fall off if I turn the movement over, and I need to turn the movement over so that I can get to the other side briefly. And the reason is that I want to let out the spring tension in the mainspring and stop the movement from running. And the reason I want to do that is the next thing we need to do is put on the dial and hands, and you don't want the movement running when you're putting the hands on. It becomes very difficult to keep the hands properly aligned when you're setting them if the movement is running. So I need to stop the movement so we can put the dial and hands on. The way you let the power out of the mainspring is you hold on to the crown and then you use a screwdriver to push the click out of the way and hold it out of the way while the mainspring then unwinds. And you want to hold on to the crown and let it just kind of slip slowly through your fingers. You don't want it to let it unwind real quickly because it can damage parts in the watch. I really don't like doing that because it's kind of risky. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to bother actually letting down the power and the movement right now. What I'm going to do, this has been running for about 24 hours now. I'm going to let it just keep running until it runs down on its own. So we'll come back to this and put the hands and dial on after it finishes running down. That way I don't risk messing something up because I have a hard time holding on that little crown with my fingers without it slipping too fast. One thing we can do while we're waiting for the movement to finish winding itself down is we need to clean up the case and we need to remove the old crystal because I've got a new crystal I'm going to install. The old one's pretty scratched up. And a new crystal only costs $7, so I'm just going to go ahead and replace it. So to replace the crystal, I'm going to use a crystal lift, which looks like these kind of scary looking claws. And the way it works is you put the crystal lift over the crystal. You can adjust the opening of the jaws. So you'll adjust it until they're just slightly larger than the existing crystal, and then you tighten it. And this ideally should be done with the case resting on the hard surface of the desk, not held in your hands. I just held it up like that to demonstrate how it works. But basically what you do is you keep tightening the knob on top of it until the old crystal will lift out. You don't want to tighten too much because then you can break the old crystal. You just want to tighten it enough that the old one will come out, and there it is. It's just popped out. So since we got the old one out, we just loosen the jaws to drop it out. And once we're ready to install the new one, I'll show the procedure for doing that as well. Here's our case with no crystal or anything in it. And it's pretty dirty looking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into some alcohol. I've got a little jar here of isopropyl alcohol, and it looks really, really filthy. So I think I'm going to get some new alcohol for it. I've replaced my dirty jar of alcohol with a new one, and these are little 8-ounce mason jars with wide mouths. They're real good for cleaning small parts like this. I'm just going to put that in there, put the lid on it, and swish it around a little while for a minute or so. That'll dislodge any grease and dirt and gunk on it. And it's looking a lot shinier already, just seeing it through the side of the glass. I don't know how well that shows on the video. Let's go ahead and take it out and take a look at it. Yeah, that already looks cleaner. So what I'm going to do is while I've got it wet like this, I'm going to take one of our nail tees, which are these cotton swabs out. They're real sharp, pointy tips. They're really great for cleaning watch parts. These are something that's sold actually for women to use in nail salons. They sell them on Amazon, and they're called nail teas. There's the packaging for them, and like you can see, they're made for cleaning fingernails, but they work really well for watchmakers too. So what I'm going to do is dip this in the alcohol, and the thing I'm really concerned about is the inside of the case. It tends to get dirtier than the outside because of the exposure to oils and grease and such from the movement. So I'm just going to clean the inside of that, and you can see the cotton swab's not getting too dirty. This one's not nearly as filthy as some other ones I've worked with, but I want to make sure I get everything cleaned out good. Oh, the stem tube, it was really filthy. I stuck the tip in there and it took out a lot of dirt. Yeah, look at that. That's really filthy. I'm just kind of spinning it around in there, and now it's coming out clean. So I think we got it all cleaned out. I want to clean the outside of it too. Wipe over the outside, make sure that there's no dirt and gunk that's accumulated over years of wearing on someone's wrist. This thing is probably 65 years old. It was made around 1960, or at least sometime in the early 1960s. I'm not sure about the exact age. It's taken off a lot of brown dirt and stuff coming off there. One place I really want to clean too is the little groove where the crystal goes in, because the old crystal was real filthy around its bottom edge. So I want to make sure we get this nice and clean before we put a new crystal in. And I also want to clean the bottom of the case. It's going to get the most gunk from people's sweat and dirt from their hands and their arms, from your skin. Cleaning this up's kind of revealing some of the wear on the gold plating that wasn't as obvious before. So I think this looks pretty clean. I'll go ahead and dry it now. I'm going to dry it just using a hair dryer to make sure all the alcohol is evaporated off of it. And then it'll be ready to install a new crystal. Now I'll install the crystal when I'm getting ready to put the movement in it. Before we can put the dial and the hands on, we need to put a couple other components onto the dial side of the movement. First, we need to put on the hour wheel, which slips over the cannon pinion, just like that. Make sure the teeth with it mesh with the minute wheel. And it goes down all the way. There we go. Now the next thing that goes on is the dial washer, and that just goes over the hour wheel, over the hour wheel post. Now we're ready to put the dial on. To put the dial on, you need to make sure that the post for the cannon pinion and hour wheel go through the center hole in the dial. And then the dial should line up with the number 3 position by the stem. And then the post for the second hand needs to go through the little second hand hole also. The next thing we need to do is put on the dial screws. And there's the 2 dial screws that we took off when we disassembled the movement. One is at the 4 o'clock position and one is at the 10 o'clock position. You can see there the hole for one of them. We've got one of the dial screws in now. We can go ahead and tighten that down, then we can turn the movement around and put the other dial screw in. It's time now to mount the hands. The hands have to go on in a specific order. The hour hand goes on first, and then the minute hand goes on next. And then the second hand we can put on actually anytime, but the hour hand and minute hand stack on top of each other here in the center. And the hour hand attaches to the brass colored post, which is the post on the hour wheel, and then the minute hand goes above that on the silver post, which is the top of the cannon pinion. And when we put these on, they have to be oriented in a certain way as well. The hour hand must be pointed directly at one of the number positions. It doesn't matter which one. You could point it directly at the 1, the 2, the 3, the 9, the 10, whatever. It doesn't matter, as long as it's pointing directly at one of the hour number positions. And then the minute hand needs to be pointing directly at the 12. And the reason that they have to be oriented like this is so that the hour hand and minute hand stay in proper sync with each other as it keeps time. If you put the minute hand on pointing directly at the 12 and the hour hand pointing directly at one of the numbers, as the hands move around while the watch is keeping time, the hour hand will always point directly at one of the hour markers when the minute hand is at the 12, just as it should. I've got the hour hand mounted, and you can see it's pointed directly at the 3. I've pressed it down far enough that it's flush with the top, that the top of the hour hand is flush with the top of the hour wheel post. And that's the way it should be. You don't want to push it down any further or it'll be hard to get this back off if we ever have to pull the hands again. but you don't want it any higher because then there won't be enough room for the minute hand to fit on top of it. I've got all the hands on and the watch is running. I wound it up so that we make sure everything is working. The second hand, when I put it on, it doesn't really matter where you put the second hand, where you point it. It can point to any position on its dial. Only the hour hand and minute hand have to be precisely positioned in the way that I just described. Now the next thing we need to do is case the watch, but before we do that, we need to install a new crystal in the case because I took the old crystal out since it was all scratched up, and I've got a brand new crystal for it, which we're going to install. And I wasn't sure what kind of a crystal to get for this because the old one looked like it was it's a domed acrylic crystal, and the old one looked like it was not quite as high as the high dome crystals I bought for some of my other watches. I bought a low dome crystal and a high dome crystal just to be sure so I could try the two of them and see what would work best. And I thought this case being such a thin case, you can see it's not very thick, would work well with a low dome crystal, but I'm not sure if that would fit the hands because the hands do stick up quite a bit, so I may need to use the high dome crystal. But we'll try that and see which one works. The high dome crystal I've got is a little bit higher than the crystal that was the original one, but the low dome crystal is lower than the original, so I couldn't get one that was exactly the same height as the one that came on the watch. I've installed the low dome crystal in the case. We'll see if that fits when we put the movement in. The first thing I need to do to put the movement in is remove the stem, because the stem has to come out so we can get it into the case. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen the stem retaining screw. And I don't want to turn it too much. I don't want to loosen it enough that it makes the detent lever fall off on the other side of the movement, because then I've got to take the hands and dial back off to fix that. There we go. Now, I want to dust off the dial, make sure that it doesn't have any dirt or dust on it. I'll use some canned air for that. Then I'm going to set it on the casing cushion. Then I'll take the case and set it over it with the stem hole at the 3 o'clock position. Now let's turn it over, let it fall into the case. Now I'm hoping that the hands and everything will fit in there and won't have any trouble hitting the crystal. The next thing I need to do is put the stem back in and then put in the movement holder. So we'll go ahead and push the stem in. It looks like the hole is not perfectly aligned with the little more. There we go, that looks better. Now it's going in. Okay, now that that's in, we need to tighten the stem retaining screw. Then we can put the movement holder in. It goes in with the little tabs that fold over. Those go on top of the movement. So it goes in with the little cutout too. There's a little cutout for the stem that has to align with the stem. And then we just push it down so that it's even all the way around. And that's all there is to it. Now we can put the back on the watch. I had to pull the stem out and reset it. I didn't have it in all the way. I've gone ahead and wound the watch up the rest of the way so that it's fully wound. We need to do, before I put the back on, we need to do the final regulation of the watch. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the back and set it on here so that I can put it on the Timegrapher without the movement falling out. And then once we get the final regulation done, then I'll snap it on all the way. This is a snap-on back. They're a real pain to take back off, so I don't want to have to snap this on and snap it back off multiple times when we're regulating it. When I first put this on the Timegrapher, before I did any regulation, after I put it in the case, I demagnetized it again and put it on the Timegrapher, and it was running at plus 10 seconds a day in the dial-up position and plus 20 seconds a day in the vertical positions. And so I've got it regulated now where it's settling in around -8 seconds a day in the dial-up. And we've got great amplitude, 281, no beat error. I'm going to see what the readings are in one of the vertical positions, try it with the crown down position. Since we've got this to -10 with the dial up, it should be around plus 10 with the vertical positions. And if it's like that, I think I'll leave it as it is, because they should kind of cancel each other out as I wear the watch during the day. Well, in the crown down position, it looks like we're getting 0 seconds a day. So I think I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit so that the dial-up position won't be so slow. Here we are now. I've got it to +4, +5 seconds per day in the dial-up position. I think I'm going to leave it at this. I think this is really, really excellent. This is a 65-year-old watch. It's running beautifully, I think. So I think we're all done with this. I've got a new band to put on it, and we'll be all done. Now that the watch is regulated, I've snapped the back on, and I cleaned the back too before I snapped it back on. Having cleaned the case and cleaned the back and gotten rid of a lot of the gunk and junk that was in there, The back snapped on really easily, and I had a really horrible time removing it when I had to snap it off to begin with. Part of that was because this little lip right here that's made for you to stick a tool into to pop it open. Whoever worked on this watch the last time had put the back on incorrectly and had this opening lip facing the crown, which means I couldn't get a tool in there to pop it open without damaging the crown. And so I ended up having to use a razor blade forced into the edge to pop it open, and that was a real difficult thing to do without damaging something. And you can see there's some damage along the case in the back where someone else had done that in the past too. So when I put it back together, I put it in with the opening spot facing toward the lug so that it'll be real easy to reach. And with it being cleaned off, it just snapped right on. I didn't have any of the difficulty snapping it on that I had snapping it off because all that gunk and dirt was acting as kind of an adhesive and keeping the back from coming off easily. I need to set the time on it, and I need to put a new strap on it. I bought a brand new strap because the old strap that came on it, eBay sellers must have some place that they get these crappy straps from, because I bought several watches that have straps that are just absolute garbage. They must get them for almost nothing. And they put them on so they can claim that they give you a new strap. And this thing feels like and looks like plastic. So I bought a nice leather strap for it. You don't have to spend a ton of money to get a decent strap. This leather strap here I bought on Amazon. And it's made out of real leather. And it's made by a company called Anafit. Amazon sells these, and they sell them on, I think they have their own website too, but Amazon is cheaper for them. And they're not very expensive. I think I paid $14 for this strap. And what's nice about these two is they actually sell these in the 17mm lug width that this watch uses. A lot of these old watches I've worked on, Bullovas are famous for this too, having 17mm lug widths. Nobody makes 17mm straps anymore. They're very difficult to find. And this Anafit company, which is a Chinese thing, they're making them in the right size. And they've got the quick release spring bars that make them easier to put on and off and everything. I've bought a lot of these straps over the years for my watches, and typically I buy them for watches that are ones I'm not going to wear all the time because they're a less expensive strap. I tend to buy more expensive straps for the ones I'm going to wear a lot. But I think this one, being the fact that it needed the 17mm size, I do plan to wear this watch a lot because I like it a lot. But I think that this inexpensive strap will still be fine because it fits well. And these straps, I've worn them a lot on my other watches, and they're really comfortable. They're kind of stiff when you first get them, but they soften up real quickly. And they've held up real well. I've got some of them I've had for several years, and they still look really nice. They're not falling apart or anything like the cheap straps that a lot of eBay sellers provide on the watches that they sell. So if you're looking for straps that are cheap but actually pretty decent quality, I can recommend these Anafit straps. They work really well. There we go. So there we go. Well, now we're all set. I need to set the time on it, and I'm probably going to have to punch another hole in the strap because I have such skinny wrists. I usually end up having to punch another hole in the strap to make them fit me. Aside from that, we're finished with this, and this is a watch I think I'm going to wear a lot. It's a beautiful old watch. I love the style of it. The low dome crystals I put on it worked really beautifully too. It fit well. Once it was compressed and put into the case, it kind of domed up a little bit higher than it looked before I put it in. And it's a little closer now to the appearance of the original, and I think the one that was on it before might, I don't know, it might have been slightly taller than this, but I don't know. It may be about the same. So it looks really well, and I like how that looks on it. I'm glad I didn't put a high dome crystal. I think it would have looked bad on a case this thin. And there it is on my wrist. I got it set to the proper time, and it's working great. Looks beautiful, doesn't it?